Boehm Street steps are a closed set of steps that have been on my bucket list to climb for quite some time now. The Boehm Street steps are a set of steps that used to go from the top of Oakland all the way down to 2nd Avenue, with a long pedestrian bridge going over the Parkway East. The pedestrian bridge has been bulldozed for quite some time now, and the steps have been closed ever since. But the top portion of the steps are still accessible via the Oakland neighborhood. On Friday, I met up with my good step trekking buddy Bill once again with the ultimate goal of getting to the Boehm Street steps. A few months ago, I mapped out a wonderful hike that started out in Squirrel Hill and ultimately ended up at the Boehm Street steps. So we decided to incorporate that hike as well. It was a 5-mile hike that starts out at Murray Avenue in Squirrel Hill, continues on through Schenley Park, down through Oakland, and ultimately over to the Boehm Street steps. Starting off the hike, we met up in Oakland and took the 61C over to Squirrel Hill. We got off the bus at the intersection of Murray Avenue and Hobart Street. Right at the corner, there is a tiny little set of steps. They are not listed on the ARCGIS map, but they are a public set, so I made sure to get those in. From there, we headed down Hobart Street over to Murdoch Street to climb a small set of steps situated right in the middle of Murdoch Street. Murdoch Street begins as an alley and basically dead ends as a pair of steps and continues as a regular street at the top of the steps. From Murdoch Street, we turned onto Beacon Street, and this is where we embarked on our Schenley Park portion of the step trek. Once we got to Schenley Park, we took the Upper Panther Hollow Trail, which led us through the graffiti tunnel, and we could actually see the great horned owl nest that had been made underneath the Panther Hollow Bridge. The nest was no longer occupied, but it was still really cool to see the nest. These steps in Schenley Park take you up to a stone landing on a cement path. These two mini sets of steps are very random, but listed as public sets of steps on the ARCGIS map. The steps leading up to the Christopher Columbus Monument are not listed on the ARCGIS map, but they are technically a public set of steps, so we included them in our little trek. We then made a trek across the Schenley Bridge to get over to Oakland. Just past the Schenley Bridge in Oakland is a war memorial known as the Hiker. This was erected in 1925 to honor the men who fought in the Spanish-American War. We then walked behind the Frick Fine Arts building to climb down the Jonker Street steps. These were a newly renovated set of steps that took you down to the South Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh. From there, we headed over to Yarrow Street to walk up a set of sidewalk steps. We ended up going right back down because I didn't realize at the time that there was another way to approach these steps without having to do that. We then headed down Boundary Street over to Diulis Way. These steps have been on my bucket list for several years now. One of my favorite things about these steps are the number of orphan houses situated alongside these steps. Another cool thing about these steps is once you get to the top of the steps, you have a really amazing view of the rainbow houses located on Dawson Street. Directly next to the Boulevard of the Allies Bridge lies a very steep wooden set of steps that takes you down to Juneau Street. These steps were pretty intimidating as they were missing railings in spots. Bill also said these steps are quite shaky, and because it was raining, I didn't want to slip and fall, so I only made it down the first part of the steps. What's even crazier is that these are actually listed as open on the ARCGIS map. For our final set of the day, we made our way down McKee Place to take the Louisa Street steps down to Colthart Avenue. And yes, you saw that correctly. There's a random pack of buns just chilling at the top of the steps. Unfortunately, we didn't end up making it over to the Boehm Street steps. The rain that was supposed to stop before we started hiking ended up continuing and became a pest. And once we got to McKee Place, we ultimately made the decision to end the step trek right then and there and head back downtown. Even though we missed the Boehm Street steps, as well as the last couple sets in Oakland, it was still an enjoyable hike. We started off the hike in Oakland, where we met up to grab a bite to eat. From there, we hopped on the 61C over to Murray Avenue in Squirrel Hill. Once we were in Squirrel Hill, we hiked 3 sets of steps over there before making our way over to Schenley Park. One of the steps we hiked in Squirrel Hill was Wendover Place. I initially thought these steps were a public right-of-way, as did my friend Bill. We learned after the fact, however, that this was not in fact a public right-of-way, but a private drive. Thankfully, nobody gave us any grief for hiking them. Once we got to Schenley Park, we hiked a few sets in and around the Schenley Park area. We also got to see the abandoned great horned owl nest, and even though the owl babies were no longer in the nest, we were able to see one of them in a nearby tree, which was really cool. We also got to go down to the lower part of Schenley Park, which is one of my favorite areas of the park. You really don't feel like you're in the city. From there, we made our way across the Schenley Bridge and over into Oakland. We stopped at the Carnegie Library for a pit stop, and we got to see the window where you can look down and see the dinosaur exhibit at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. From there, we made our way to the Jean Clair Steps and down through South Oakland and over to Diulis Way. This was a really cool part of Pittsburgh that I hadn't actually seen in that I actually hadn't seen in person, and it was really cool to see. It really gives you an old Pittsburgh feel, and I loved it. Unfortunately, once we got to the top of Diulis Way, that's when the rain really started picking up. And once we got to McKee Place, that is where we decided to stop the hike. I'm hoping that we can get to the Boehm Street Steps in the next couple weeks, as I've been dying to climb these for a few years now. And if I don't get to them before the weeds grow in, I'm gonna have to wait until December. And one of the reasons I really want to get to these closed sets now is because if I wait too long, they might no longer be accessible. Well, I hope you enjoyed my wonderful hike through Squirrel Hill, Oakland, and Schenley Park, and I hope to see you on the next.